Okay, for those of you who do know, I participated in a KFL this past summer. And our season's over. We finished just out of, we really just needed to win one game to get into the playoffs, and it didn't happen. But that's what happens when you've got a team that we weren't really sponsored by anybody. We were funding our own way, and everybody that's on the team is a person that works for a living. So I have both education and private clients that I work for on the side for music, and then I've got my teammates. One of them works in corrections, the others are in construction, and it makes it really hard for us, especially here in Florida when you are in the rainy season, especially for the construction guys. When they get called, they got to go, especially if there's a hurricane or a big storm that comes in. So it makes it hard for us to kind of travel or take time off to kind of really pre-fish the away games. And the way we thought about it was, hey, we have to win a couple away games to secure our spot. And I think if we'd won one away game, we'd have been good because we were pretty confident nobody's going to beat us at home, and nobody did. The KFL game that's on my channel last week, you saw that we put up some big numbers. We averaged a 10 fish average of 21 inches apiece. We killed it. But I have all this footage from these other games. Some of it's not great. It's not stuff that I really necessarily wanted to show, but I figured, hey, well, let's talk about it because I did catch a few fish. And there were some things that I really needed to kind of learn from this. And it was just about making adjustments on the fly on water that you have no idea how to fish. Now, there's people that will give Florida fishermen a lot of flack for honey hole fishing or whatever, but if you come down here and fish all the different lakes down here, we have a bit of everything down here. We've got deep water, we've got rivers, we've got lakes that have lots of grass, lake with no grass, lake with some type of edge. There's a lot of stuff you can do here in Florida. You can fish topwater, you can fish punching bite, you can drag a worm, you can do drop shot if you're in the right place. I've done it before. So there's a lot of stuff you can do here. The big issue though is that when you get on a body of water that you have no idea how to fish, that it makes it hard. And for us, we felt we had a pretty good secret advantage that most of the people on this team don't. We didn't grow up in Florida. I grew up in Pennsylvania. Matt grew up in Pennsylvania. Benetti up in New York. So and even John, who's done very well outside of the state, he is not originally from Florida. So there's a lot of we could have done better is what I'm saying, but there's a lot of things that kind of got in the way too. So I mean, let's just start with this first game. This is the footage from the first game. It was up on Lake Randall or Randleman Reservoir, I believe it's called, up in North Carolina, and it was against the Carolina Casters, and we were kind of favored to win this game. We got up there and we got up there late. First of all, we had a hurricane roll through, which stopped me from traveling up on Wednesday night and being there to fish Thursday. And the lake isn't huge. It's only 3,000 acres, but it's got a lot of standing timber. It's a deep lake. It's got a lot of deep cuts and stuff like that. So we were looking at reservoir fishing. Okay, what do we need to do? And we were talking to people that knew the lake, and we were getting information from people that we were friends with or people that we knew through the vine, and trying to just figure out what to do on this lake. Well, the lake, again, it isn't huge, but the top part is a little bit different from the southern end, and I didn't get a chance to fish the southern end. I wanted to fish both ends to figure out where I wanted to go. There's only two ramps, a kayak ramp at the top and a boat ramp at the bottom. Now, a couple things worked against us. I said we had the hurricane roll through, and when we got up there, it was hot, and the fish were not on laydowns on the shoreline like we were thinking, or on standing timber. In fact, the only fish that I caught it was in a back pocket, and I'm pretty sure it was back there because this place was loaded with bait fish, and I really wish I didn't catch it. I was just trying to get a bite to figure out, what will they hit? What are they looking for? I kind of figured they're going to be on a shad pattern. It looked like shad is like the main forage there. So he hit a white spinnerbait, nice 18-inch largemouth, northern strain. I think it's kind of also mixed with a spotted strain. It's a little bit different. They got small mouths, small heads, which, I mean, smaller than your normal northern largemouth. But we got up there, and all the laydowns and stuff on the banks and stuff looked good. But the thing that was kind of weird was that the laydowns would look good, but 10, 20 feet out from the shore, it would only be like 2 feet deep. It'd be really, really shallow. And then, out past the shore, it would drop down and you get down into 15, 20 feet. So, we figured, okay, let's take a look at some riprap and stuff like that. And, we had some bites, and I shook off what I thought were small fish, small bass. I didn't let them take the worm completely. I didn't set the hook. I figured if anything, I have like the micro bite going on. As long as they're 14 inches, they count. I can, 140 inches and 10 fish, it still gives at least a chance to win. Conrad got into some fish. He burned a spot, but that's something else to talk about later. But Conrad, I love you, but if 7 fish are hitting the same thing, it's a pattern, regardless if they're small or big. But it's something else to talk about later. But anyway, so we fished, and we only really had one opportunity to fish the lake. So Conrad and I fished the north end. Matt went down to the south end, and our fourth teammate Sherman wasn't able to make it up because of work until the night before. So we pre-fished and came out with the best plan that we could. There's no grass in this lake except for the few patches that is really shallow up along the edges and things like that. And the fish weren't holding to them. There were some bait fish in there, but not any bass or anything. I tried flipping that. So comes the day of the tournament, and we decided we're going to split up originally, 2 on the top, 2 in the south. And Sherman had gotten some really good information about areas in the south, and he got down there first. But unbeknownst to us, there was a 100-boat tournament that day, so he's stuck way back in the line trying to get in, and it's going to take forever. So he's like, I don't think I have time to, I'm going to lose an hour just getting in here, and then another hour probably getting to my spots. So he came up and fished with us on the north end. So we all fished at the north end because Matt was planning to go down there too, but he had to drop Conrad off with me because they traveled together, and Matt has a truck to carry both kayaks. So we ended up all fishing up in the north end, and we ended up doing terrible. It started off great. I started off catching, this fish right here. After that fish, there wasn't a whole lot of action. I ended up catching another fish, which I thought was really good, and you'll see me throw up here, and I'm working a crankbait along the riprap, bouncing off the rocks like you would fish this kind of stuff, and I get tagged, right? Yeah, it turns out it was a catfish, which kind of sucked. But it is what it is. There's nothing I can do about that. So I get the catfish off, and I end up catching one other little guy he's about 12 and a half inches. He's not legal. And I had another one miss. And I'd seen fish blowing up, but not big fish in that area. So I kind of figured they're probably all this size. They're not going to help out. So I made a long move. I fished coves. I fished laydowns. Apparently, because this lake gets so much pressure, the fish don't hang on the laydowns on the shoreline because just gets beat to all hell. So apparently the fish move off deeper onto isolated structure or isolated rock piles, and the rock piles are small. You got to find them, or you got to know where they're at. I felt like if we would have gone to the south end and just stuck out the boat line, we probably could have done well. I mean, the home team, they only had 116 or so inches. It wasn't a great number. We had an abysmal number of something like 40 or something. My 30-inch fish, my 15-inch fish was the biggest one of the day. And, when we found out what the home team was doing, they were trash fishing. That's stuff that we're good at, not flipping into mats, but they're throwing on top of mats and then just pulling off and letting it sink under on the edge, and they're getting hit. And I purposely came upon a mat, and I was like, I wonder if I should punch this. I was like, I don't know if these fish up here, because there's not a lot of grass, if they're used to a punch bite. And so I didn't even think to punch it. I just kept moving on and, tried to fish stuff that's offshore, tried to fish some ledges. I really wasn't finding fish on ledges and edges like that. And, it's just the fish seem to be just out in some deeper water and isolated things on maybe an isolated stump somewhere in deep water or under a mat. And that's what we should have done. We should just trash fished, and we should have fished the deeper arm that was where everybody was fishing. That's where we should have gone and just kind of fought to get those fish. Sherman ended up catching like 1 million white bass, which don't count. So that was an experience and a half. And really, we tried to fish it like a person in a boat could. And you can skip around in a boat, like find a rock pile here, let's fish it, there's fish on it. And move over here, it's not good, travel a mile down this way. You really can't do that in a kayak. You have to find an area and you have to pick it apart. And I felt like we did that pretty well. We just weren't in the right area, and we weren't fishing like we normally fish, like we should fish. Guys from Florida, we should be trash fishing. We should be flipping. We should be pitching. We should be, fishing topwater, stuff like that. Not worried about dragging stuff deep. And we just didn't do it. And I think we kind of got inside our own heads. But I think we could have figured this out if we had 2 days. We didn't have 2 days to figure it out. So that was the one away game that really kind of put us behind. The team actually did very well. I didn't go to Alabama, but the team actually did pretty well in Neely Henry. They lost by about 15, 20 inches to what we consider the best team in the league, which is Alabama. So, sticking that close on their home water, I was pretty happy with that. I wasn't part of it, but the guys did a great job. So the next game was in Virginia, and it was a Dyson Reservoir, however you pronounce it. And it's a nice little trophy hole. You can catch tons of fish. It's like their Fellsmere, if we want to think about it that way. It's electric only, so you can only get electric boats on there or kayaks. So there isn't like an immense amount of pressure. It's not a huge reservoir. It's very tiny. You could paddle the entire thing in one day. But it's full of big spots. It's full of big largemouths, and they're aggressive. And so we had an issue with that. I originally wasn't planning to fish it and decided I did so bad at Randleman. I was like, I can't let this go. I have to go and prove to myself that I can do this. I grew up in Pennsylvania. I fished reservoirs and rivers up there. I should know how to catch these fish. So I didn't get a chance to go up until the day before, but teammate decided that he was going to go up and take the week off, and he has a stepdaughter that lives up there, stayed with them, and just fished it every day for a week. And Starley did a great job picking it apart. We were looking at contour lines and stuff on maps, and like, Starley, check this out. Can you check this out? I think the fish are going to school here. All that information that I gave him and all the information he gave me turned out being correct when he tested it. So we had spots. I just needed to get up there and figure out, where can I get some bites, mark off, and then come back the next day. So we went to this first place where there's kind of a saddle, and it just, he's like, they've been here every day over this grass flat, and he's like, I've caught big ones here. So I think my second cast, I hook into a 19.5-inch bass. I'm like, we're good. So that tells me, the fish are still there. They've been there all week. I caught one, he's caught them, so we move off. We don't bother burning that anymore. We know the fish are in that area, and I know there's a flat north of that too that I really had my eyes on too. I'm like, I think there might be fish up there too, but we just got to pay attention. You'll see them explode. Like, top water at that lake is insane. So we go up and we hit some laydowns that he picked up and said, there's laydowns here, and I've had like 5 really good bites in this area. So I'm like, okay, we'll save that. We'll skip it. I went and fished another little section with some laydowns, and I got bit, and I didn't hook the fish. I marked it, and we moved on. We went up and we got a couple more bites way up the reservoir, and we decided, let's not. There's only 2 of us. If the fish seem to be really concentrated in these 2 saddles, which they seem to have been all week, let's just fish that, and we'll work that really hard, and hopefully we can get on the numbers, because 2 guys against 4 is it makes it hard. And the reason why we had 2 guys is because work. We had some heavy rains come through, which took a bunch of our guys in the construction crew out. And then Matt sold his house. Conrad's work schedule changed. He couldn't take that Saturday off. He had to cover. So it was just me and Starley. And we were we're trying to pull a miracle win out for our team, or at least keep it close. So the day of the tournament, well, let's start with the night before. The night before, a big storm system comes in, and it's a big one. It lasts all the next day. We get out in the water. My fear is that water temperatures are going to drop, and they did. They dropped by like 7 degrees. I'm like, okay, well, let's start out in the flat, because I don't know how picky these fish are going to be. Like in Florida, a 7-degree drop can, especially overnight, will turn fish off, or it'll move them pretty drastically. So let's start on the flat and see what happens. We motor there. One of the other fishermen from the other team kind of goes north of us to the second flat that I had my eye on. I'm like, okay, he either knows something, or he's just keeping an eye on us. We're gonna find out, because the 3 other guys scattered to places we figured they would go based on reading and knowledge of the reservoir. But we start there, and after about an hour, there's no bites, and it's raining, and it's cool, and I'm like, hey, dude, we can't stay here. I saw some fish blowing up in deep water. I'm like, I'm gonna go over here real quick. I got over there, and to be honest, like, they would blow up every now and then. I don't know how big they were. The school wasn't big, but there was tons of bait fish, like big balls of bait fish over there in about 24 foot of water. But they weren't really holding anything. They were just moving around in the open, and I was like, man, it's kind of hard to target the fish on this. Ideally, what we should have done is just stay. I should have stayed in that area and drop shot it. But that's, when you got 2 guys and like, we're not getting any bites, I'm getting kind of desperate. So we decided, hey, let's go hit the laydowns. So Starley goes and he fishes this other place, and it's just downpouring like crazy. I end up catching a fish that's not scoreable. I hit a bunch of laydowns that they didn't have fish on them, and I worked them pretty hard. Then we go back to the spot where he'd had a bunch of bites on laydowns. I watched Starley jump off a big fish. At this point he's got 2, and we're bank beating, and he jumps off a big one that is well over 20 inches, and it sucks. So after that, he's like, "Yeah, I'm going to go back to the saddle. It's got to turn on. It's got to turn on at some point during the day. It's going to warm up. They got to turn on." So he goes. It's still raining. It's not as bad. The rain has kind of calmed down a bit. I go to the spot where I have a bite, and I get bit again. I get bit again, but it's a real quick bite, and I knew that the fish have been affected by the cold weather, and it's probably got them acting weird. I watched the fish actually come up, grab the worm, and immediately spit it. He wasn't huge. He's in that 14 to 16 inch range, but he would have scored. And I figured, man, how many other times have I had a fish bite and me not notice it? And I had caught at this point 2 fish in laydowns that were too small to count. They were in that 10 to 12 inch range. So I finally hit another laydown that's out in the middle that I wouldn't think anybody would have fished. Most people look like they skipped it. And I hook into an 18-inch bass. He grabs it and swims at me. I land him. It's a small victory for me, but I know we're way behind at this point. This is when the weather changes like this. This really favors the locals, and they're putting the hammer down on us. So we get out to the saddle. We fish it some more, and it doesn't work out. Sun comes out, and it doesn't. There's nothing we can do at that point. So come to find out that if we would have moved up north just a little bit of where we were, or if I would have stayed in that deep area, the fish were grouping up in the deeper water on the edges, and in the afternoon they started blowing up like nuts. And you just kind of had to, we were told like every 10 minutes on the dot, they would just start exploding. If you were close to them, you could throw in them, you were going to catch them. So, the Virginia team was cool, and they were like, yeah, man, if you'd have just moved 100 yards up, you would have been on them all day. And we got desperate because we weren't catching them, and it's a lake that we don't know, so we don't know what the patterns are when things change like that. So we should have just moved up or moved to deeper water. I should have drop shot out of those big balls, and I probably would have ended up with some fish. I'm not saying that we could have won, but we felt pretty confident going into that because Starley was averaging 17 to 20 inches on the fish he was catching, and I think we could have done well, but it just happens. Only having 2 guys and then a complete weather change overnight, it sucks. But because speaking of complete weather changes, we faced the best team in our opinion in the league in Alabama. We faced them on our home turf, Fellsmere, and we put them on it, and they were pretty confident. These guys have been down here and fished. They haven't fished it recently though, so they come down, they fish it, and they're talking a little bit of smack on Facebook. That's okay. We're pretty confident. This is our home water. So we get out there, and I put John on a spot, and John has only fished it a couple times. I'm like, hey, fish in this area, you're going to find fish. I move to a spot, and I immediately catch like 2 or 3 small ones, non-scoreable fish. And then it takes a while before I actually get a fish that's scoreable, and I'm noticing that they're not hitting the top water. It's really hot. It's like 110 degrees heat index, and there's not a lot of breeze. I'm like, I bet these fish are going to be holding real tight to maybe these rows or underneath the hydrilla. So after messing around a while, I start fishing some of the deeper cuts, and I get one on top water, and it's my biggest fish of the day, which ends up being like 16 some inches. Good thing is Matt's there. Matt came with us, and he was fishing exactly where I thought he would fish, so I didn't touch those areas. And he rolls down there, and the first fish he puts on the board is like 23 inches. And then after that, it was just a slugfest of like 16 to 17s between Matt and John. And I'm just kind of hitting my things. I feel confident knowing that they're putting fish on the board. I can just focus on trying to find a big one. So I'm doing what I normally do, hitting some old spots. And there's fish there. They're just not scoreable. So I ended up catching a bunch of little guys. And then I ended up getting on KFL Live and talking. And as I'm on live, I watch at this big, it was probably 21, 22-inch fish come 2-3 feet out of the water, smack my popper when he does it. And he obviously, because he hits it so hard, he doesn't get a chance to actually get that bait in his mouth. So when he lands, the line went tight, but the bait popped out of his mouth. And I was like, dang, man, if you'd have just sucked that in or hit it like normal or sideways, I would have had you. And the only thing that changed at that point is we had a storm system roll through, threw down some thunder, some lightning, and there was some heavy rain for about I want to say 30 minutes, and then a breeze came in, and that breeze turned my top water bite on. Matt's had to shut his off, but mine was on. So the fish though were short striking, even though they're more aggressive. They were started to short strike. So I had missed that big one. I missed another one out in another cut. I missed another big fish that short struck it 3 times. He missed it the first time, but put enough of a swirl to kind of drag the bait underwater. And as I was dragging it underwater, he swung on it again. I saw him, and I was like, oh crap, he missed it. So I was trying to reel in to kind of recast over where he missed it so I can pop it right there. And as I get the bait to the boat and lift it out of the water, he swirls right on it right there and misses it. I had another one right after that, try to grab it right at the boat as I was lifting it out of the water. Ended up catching another 16 a little bit later and another 14 or so that didn't really help. I ended up calling that one. John ended up missing one that was like 22 inches. He said it was big. He's like, I had it at the kayak and he jumped, and he's like, I watched my plopper go woo, and he was gone. So he was frustrated about that, but the bite kind of turned on. Now the funny thing is, we ended up beating Alabama. We didn't beat them by too much. I think it was like 159 to like 175 or something. We didn't have an awesome day, but because we're the home team, we know how the fish are going to act, and we were able to put fish on the board where they were able to put fish on the board, but they were struggling. And when I was talking to them, they said, yeah, on our pre-fish, we were catching 20, 22, 23 inchers, all kind of grouped up. And he's like, and they said that, some of the mats they had marked off, the wind and the rain changed overnight, and the mats weren't there, or the fish weren't under the mats anymore, or they weren't in these holes. And we knew that. We kind of knew where the fish were going to be. Matt got on them. I got on them too. They were just small, and then John at least got on them as well, and we were able to get a limit of decent sized fish in to pull the win. But that I told him, hey man, we experienced this the last two games that we did where we had stuff just change overnight, and our game plan went to pot. So those were the last three games that I fished for the KFL, and they weren't awesome. Learning experience definitely for sure. Like I have to do a little bit more research into each lake. We really just need more time. If I had like 2 to 3 days to kind of pick apart a place, I feel like I would have done a lot better. But having one day with 6 hours in a different state with different temperamental bass, it's difficult. But it was fun. I don't know if we're going to do it next year or not. We haven't decided yet. We got to see what the team schedule looks like and everything like that before we decide as a team. Because again, we're not sponsored guys. We don't have big sponsors helping us out. We had one help us for one house stay at the North Carolina game. So the house we stayed at was paid for, which was really cool. But everything else is on us, and we're working people. We have jobs, we have families, and we can't dedicate 2 or 3 weeks at a time in the summer to go and pre-fish for something that's not necessarily guaranteed. We got to take care of our family first. But it was fun. Thanks to the KFL and Greg Nosar for putting this on. We'll see what happens next year, but I'm sorry I don't have better footage to show you guys, but we're just absolutely killing it. Things kind of worked against us, but really there's no excuses. We should have made better adjustments faster on the fly. But, it is what it is, and you can't get frustrated over it. You can't get mad. You just have to, it's fishing. I mean, if it was called catching, you'd catch every single one, but it's fishing, and that's the way it is. So, good thing is, though, we stayed undefeated at home, and I'm pretty happy about that. Nobody beats us here. We know these waters, so hopefully we can continue that next year. But again, we'll see. Sorry again that this ain't the greatest video, or this doesn't have like the most awesome footage. But I had this footage, and I was like, what do I do with it? So hopefully things turn around. I'm getting prepping for the KAF, and I've got some KBF things I want to do at the beginning of next year. We'll see how those go. The KAF kicks up again in November, so if you want to join us, find the KAF Facebook page, pay the membership fee, and then join us on the trail. We start out at Lake Kissimmee in November, and I'm gonna put some work in on this bad boy. I wanna get some wins this year, and the championship is not on the St. John's again, which again I fished better than I did last year, but still terrible. So I just hate fishing that section of the river. But it's on Lake Toho, so I'm trying to get qualified for that because Lake Toho, that's one of my home lakes. So that being said, until next time, stay safe out there, and I'll catch you in the next one.